John Hess and his wife Gina are here from Missouri. We're so glad. I could read you the official bio. He got his BS in biology at Wheaton College. And there is a lot of BS at Wheaton College, isn't there? And he got his Master in Science in Zoology at Southern Illinois University, and his PhD in zoology at Colorado State University in Fort Collins. He is a professor emeritus at the University of Central Missouri, right? And he's an amazing photographer as well, and his book is over there, which I'm sure he'll tell you about. None other than E.O. Wilson wrote a glowing review of that magnificent book that's over there on the Galapagos. He doesn't need much of an introduction because they are friends of this community. In fact, on a personal level, I think I first met you all in Kansas City when I went up there to speak in Kansas City one time, and they were there, and we kind of hit it off. And in addition to being a guest speaker, I consider them both good friends, and I'm always thrilled when they can come to town. And we thank you for sharing your time and your talent and everything with us today. Let's give a warm welcome to John Hess.
It's a real pleasure to be back in Houston again. I met Mike in KC, as he mentioned, a couple of years ago, actually, and this talk, this attitude that I hope to present, came pretty much from the opinion he expressed that day, in which he said just a few seconds ago, it's fun. This is for fun. Only I've taken the term joy. I'd like to do this for the sake of joy. Now I'm going to be in the road in front of some of you. I mean, if you'd like to move, I really can't put this any lower without closing it off. So, sharing the joy, that's what I'm here for today. A few years ago I did a book on the Galapagos Islands. Photographs and text, and there's some over there. I increasingly realized as I thought about the book after it was published that it was less about that place and more about a relationship, the point of view that I hope radiates from this image, which we use to promote the book. That's really why I'm here, to project that or present that point of view, not to sell books, although there they are. And they're 50 bucks, and I don't have any credit card facilities, so cash or check, or I could mail it to you if you decide that you want to have one at a later time. I'll also note that I'm deep into a second book that is about the same thing. It's about the attitude, but not so much the place. This place, my second book, is not a bucket list kind of place like the Galapagos Islands. It's a 30-acre patch of rural Missouri. The facts will be different, the pictures will be different, but the point of view is the same. It has to do with extracting joy from the ordinary. Even the Galapagos Islands are ordinary to the people that live there. And it's the frame of mind that brings the joy, much less than the place. So I'm not here to sell books, but to share this frame of mind, one that we think is a treasure and a source of great pleasure to us. And by say us, I mean Gina and I, because we are very much in sync on this subject. It's part aesthetics, it's part science, part meditation even. And in our experience, there is joy in all of it. Michael Dowd, a progressive Christian minister, calls it a sacred realist perspective. I call it evolutionary biology. But evolutionary biology is just made up of facts and the theories that come from them. As you know, facts are value-free, although they suggest conclusions about how might want to behave. In fact, it may be that a piano is falling on your head. That's a fact. And whether you want to do anything about it or not is a matter of values. So they all play out that way. Michael Dowd and I arrive at the same place, and I don't really care how we got there. What I share with him is the character of our relationship with the natural world, a much abused phrase that I will not take the time to elaborate on. But By the natural world, I mean that aggregation of species who are in sync with the natural laws and that live sustainably. That's the hooker, that last part. There's a lot to clarify, a lot to debate here, but bear with me. And if you have questions, please feel free to write them down. As our relationship with the non-human world matures, we find more pleasure in understanding how it works. More importantly, most importantly perhaps, we begin to feel like we are part of this great enterprise, like we belong to it. It is indeed a vast community to which we belong, and the pleasure, the joy, comes not from the science, which is something of a barrier to some people, but from the belonging, from melding the science and the aesthetics with the sacred. A term that I'm not exactly sure what it means, but it sounds great. Now, we vertebrates are social species, all sorts of us, baboons, elephants, whales, wolves, parrots, and all of us social species share a craving that's embedded in our psychological structure. And you have to have this or you can't make a social species. That's written somewhere. I'm not sure where. The craving that I'm referring to is the need to belong. For humans, that craving is so powerful that being denied the company of other people, by solitary confinement, say, is a maximal punishment. And I would expect the same thing would be true for other social species, elephants kept all by themselves, and such things. If you can think of yourself as a component of the thousands of human lives that support you, and that you affect, then you can feel the embrace of community. It's one of our primary goals in Oasis. My experience is that the same joy comes from seeing yourself as a component of the thousands of non-human lives that support you and that you affect. And this relationship is actually much more fundamental. The dependency that we have on it is so consistent, from our swaddling clothes to our ashes, that we often fail to notice. It's just part of how things are. Lots of good people can't make themselves, bring themselves to see it that way. For one thing, our culture doesn't encourage it, and the practices we promote in our Western culture, our values, are often antagonistic to these systems. Those values are taught consistently from nearly every source and deeply embedded in our worldview. They begin with the conviction that the world and everything in it is a pantry for humans. The natural world to which we belong, whether we feel that way or not, we can call the community of life. It is at the same time both exquisite and ordinary. In experiencing this belonging and hobnobbing with other members of the community, we experience pleasure. Go on. Yeah. Here are two views that illustrate the point in a tiny, tiny way. Much discussed over coffee, and it's the squirrel problem. Many people spend a fortune in time and apparatus to keep squirrels from eating the bird food. It says bird food right on the bag. I've seen smart people become incendiary because, from their point of view, squirrels are stealing the food. Apparently, they've concluded that the squirrels should not take food lying around because they should know that it was intended for the birds. Apparently they lack the decency to go hungry. Clearly they don't respect my right of ownership. They're thugs. And therefore they deserve whatever happens. There are so many assumptions and contradictions in that that it is dizzying. But I bet you've heard most of it at one coffee shop or a cocktail party or another. Second view, on the other hand, we can see that this little chipmunk, which is really practically a squirrel, as a fellow species, doing what he has to do to promote his family, just like us. To be sure, he or she is vastly different from us in many ways, but she can hurt, get angry, get hungry, mate, like a monkey. Nurse infants and care for them, driven by a hormonally mediated behavior. All of that just like us. So I want to explore the second position and float the whole of it over a sea of aesthetics. So today is about joy and beauty and happiness, and it didn't make a very good title with all of that in it. But I've really conflated them, and they all get along well together. Anyone can access this experience. We were built to engage with it. We were born with these skills. It's our natural state and our birthright. When I've finished, I want you to be dazzled by the beauty that surrounds us. And not only that, but to get a glimmer of how those thousands of plant and animals, heavily interdependent and with conflicting agendas, function as a well-oiled machine. It's quite extraordinary. And when you leave, I want you to carry with you that sense of tranquility that you might experience after a quiet walk in the woods or along a beach. Any place where your attention is directed outward. Now, about now, I need to throw a really, really excellent image onto the screen. A photograph so stunning in its beauty and so illuminating that all of us will have life epiphanies. Well, that's not going to happen. I'm a photographer, not a magician. However, here's a pretty picture. And it can lead us to something profound. It's a cardinal feather in the snow. Pretty, isn't it? But really a bit ominous, because you might be thinking, well, this ought to be stuck on a bird somewhere. And I've opted to start here with the truth of things, that sacred realist perspective. And this is an extremely important part of it. Thank you all. The natural world, you remember? Where the members are in sync with the natural law, the balance of nature, such an appealing phrase, but it means death in many cases, often not so spectacular as this one, but death nevertheless, so that populations can remain in balance. This is a necessary inclusion so that you don't mistake in this talk here, so that you don't mistake my enthusiasm for soft-headedness or general romantic flakiness. It's worth noticing, particularly with the awe, that our reactions to this kill are really quite peculiar. We suffer for the killed cardinal, but we don't applaud the incredible precision that permitted the capture. Nor do we seem to have any sympathy for the hawk, or empathy, who will die without the kill. It's particularly odd because we're predators ourselves. So it's peculiar, but not really surprising. Accepting this kind of a world, this life and death world, is hard for humans. We have our own deep fears that we like to keep out of sight. But beyond that, we are world-class empathizers. It's part of our social species gift. But still, if we are to belong to this community of life, enough to feel like a part of it, then we must not only accept this, we must use our big brains and to understand the absolute necessity of it and to embrace it. We are, after all, a community of both compassion and reason. The simplicity of yin and yang as a fundamental of community life, of the natural world, gets wiser and wiser as I get older and older. The absolute necessity of antagonistic forces to balance opposite is as obvious as our biceps and triceps. The reality of yin and yang is that you cannot simply have one without the other. And if you choose not to embrace this system, to deny it, I must ask, what are your options? The remainder of our time will be spent in the yin component, not exactly dancing in the sunshine, but we do need that little balancing act to follow. In assembling these images, I have not required anything of them except that they are meaningful to me. They take us where I want to go. I hope this tour through the gallery will take your minds along the paths and we can all share the joy associated with it. Here are a few more images, somewhat Zen-like. They too will direct your attention outward. There is examples of what I like to think of as simple beauty. Pleasurable constructions of shapes, lines, colors. I think the pleasure derived from simple beauty comes from a combination of signals. I mean, you look at a cardinal and you say it's beautiful. Why is that? So we have innate responses to colors and shapes, and we have enculturation responses to add to that. Now, this little guy here is a slime mold about the size of a pencil eraser. I wouldn't want to eat it because it's talking to me. It's red. You will note that red is a particularly powerful color, whether as a warning or an enticement. I think a greater power must have given danger and passion the same colors just to play with us. Now, we respond to the intense red. That's innate. We respond to the octagon. That's enculturated. But the birds are signaling too. That posture is called bill up. It's an aggressive display. And they're arguing about which one of them gets the top of the stop sign. If you've seen red-winged blackbirds, orioles, all of them do this same kind of thing. And they look like they're looking around like they've got trifocals. They do not. So, I'd like to think that my images are intimate, that they help establish a relationship between the subject and the viewer. Okay, a squabble between males here is not particularly intimate, but paying attention and getting close to animals provides an intimacy that you've never seen quite like it, anything quite like it. Intimacy might seem a strange choice of words. I felt that way about this loon. But as I got closer, I could read his intentions. Became transfixed with his beauty and the competence, his competence, in a world that I can barely understand. Looking into his eye as the sun sets, I can almost get inside his head. And in this case, you can do it and see what he's seeing at the same time. A friend and I were once talking about functional structures, house construction it was, and he made the claim that if it was functional, it was beautiful. I thought that was really a nifty idea. 35 years later, I still don't know whether you're right or not. But it is an interesting idea, and function and beauty do run together, that's for sure. Looking at living things, it's not hard to see functional beauty generously displayed. It really is everywhere you look. For example, this is a cardinal's wing. Cardinal killed himself on the window outside by our house, and spread the feathers just to admire it. It's just don't get this kind of a chance very often. The simple beauty is here, but there is a functional perfection as well. It's hard to avoid a word like elegant. I maintain that this is a different sort of beauty than simple beauty. But let's take a closer look at the same wing. We'll run through a couple of pictures, and you can just decide for yourself whether that is elegant or not. It needs to be airtight, well, not airtight, but it needs to resist wind, needs to weigh almost nothing, it needs to be self-repairing and replaceable and free. Pretty nifty trick. This picture right here shows blue denim with the wing spread out over my blue jeans. You can see that the feathers are transparent. You can almost read a newspaper through them. And their weight, as you'd expect, is, well, light as a feather. This is a scissor-tailed flycatcher. Now, it's not a cardinal, of course, but they're built on the same plan. So this is like seeing the whole package, that cardinal, imbued with life and grace, there's that word, and beauty, and with effortless control. If you can imagine what it might feel like to fly like this, to weigh almost nothing, to feel the air pressing against your wings, then you are good at projecting humanness onto animals. And it's another whole realm of engagement, which we all do. In dealing with the other, that is the world outside of ourselves, we humans are inclined to personalize everything. We have storms, Ike, Katrina. We have boats that have their names, usually feminine. We have Davy Crockett's Old Betsy rifle. We name everything. And when we don't do that, we bury them under similes and metaphors of nature, Poseidon, Bacchus. I don't think we can help it. Stephen Pinker says it's really difficult to teach anything without a metaphor. I think he's right. Scientists have to learn. They have to be taught to avoid such entanglements in attempting to retain their objectivity. But then I'm not doing science, I'm doing relationship at this point. So we're going to anthropomorphize. It's great sport, and in my view, it ought to be an Olympic event. It provides a bridge that helps us to see the commonalities of our life form with other life forms. Like this scissor tail. It mixes our human world with everybody else, and most especially with other life forms that show us a bit of ourselves in return. Then some of them are just funny. This one came to me by email. And maybe it struck me funnier than most because the physical appearance, he says I can have two. The physical appearance of the dogs is almost exactly like the two that are in our truck outside at this moment, and the psychology is very much the same there as well. So some of them are profound. This one is not. This one is just funny, but this one is profound. And now, Randy, by the use of song, the male sparrow will stake out his territory, an instinct common in the lower animals. And of course we have this situation around, just completely blind to the irony of the situation. This is done, of course, by Gary Larson, who is the unquestioned master of the genre. He put together The Far Side, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with, and I'm going to run through quickly 3 more of his cartoons that I hope will characterize this integration of worlds that I am talking about. This one, have a bite in your mouth, and you can never quite. Thank you. You can never quite handle it when the phone rings. This one is titled When Worlds Collide. This is like the bill-up behavior on the grackles. I mean, it doesn't mean anything to you, but it does to the grackles. And last, this one is particularly for this group. Please, Mom, let Mom, Dad, Rex, Ginger, Tucker, and me, and all the rest of the family see in color. Well, I tread lightly and with great humility in this area because Larson has set the bar so high. But then I have different ambitions. Here's a pelican, picture taken, well, it was in Florida, I guess. I was going to say it was here. When I saw this, I said to myself, this is a turbocharged evangelist preacher. The coiffed hair, the baleful look, I've seen it before. I titled this one, The Preacher. I regularly happen on images that make me smile at the Larson-esque nature of the world. There is very little about as majestic as a bird of prey at this point of action. And an osprey is just is really great that way. But even they need to take baths, and the mighty laid low has always been a staple of humor. And they don't like it when you look. Wonder what it'd be like to be a turtle. Would you get aggravated at the duckweed? What would it feel like all over you? Well, you can know. See, but he has a shell, and you can't feel what that would feel like. I wonder if he'd like to be a duck, where he could just sort of sit on top of that. The advance of seasons is another iteration of yin and yang. Living then, dying, and then living again, each in its season. I'll take some fragments from Ecclesiastes, which, by the way, I've learned is the favorite Bible book of atheists. It is. Look it up in Wikipedia. Anyhow, these words seem very rich to me. Everybody knows them, but still they're rich. It's a naturalist's perspective. And running through it all, I skipped a line. Everybody knows them, and still they are rich. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to kill, and a time to heal. It's good ecology as far as it goes. It's a sacred realist's perspective. And it's a naturalist perspective. And running through it all like a river is the bounty of beauty and the joy and connections of one thing to every other thing. Even more than all of that is the pleasure of being a part of it and of being one of the fibers of this great tapestry. I did 3 concerts with a group called Blackberry Winter. They did the soundtrack for Winter's Bone some years back. Delightful and talented bunch of folks from the Ozarks. I know it sounds odd, my doing a concert, but I did filled the screen, they did the songs, and we did a whole concert, three of them. And I'm going to introduce you to Linda Stoffel, who is a member of that group, and then we're going to listen to this one song called There Is a Time. Questions? Yes.
All right, great. Laura?
Do you sell prints of your photography?
Do I sell prints? Yes. Whenever possible. I have a website. I'm Brawley Creek Photography all by myself.
Yes. My question is actually, when you, I'm over here, by the way.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
When you I like human nature a lot, and I like to study the human behavior, and I like to
yes.
see it. When you're sitting around and you do something, do you sometimes realize, wow, that was not because I want to do it, but because it's almost instinct to do?
Oh yeah. There's a book by Jonathan Haidt, which I think Helen Stringer might have talked about. I don't know whether she did down here or not. It's called The Righteous Mind. He's a Harvard behaviorist, evolutionary biologist. It's a wonderful book to help explain why it is we do the things we do. And the main line of it, it's easy to read too, the main line of it, he says, is that our animal self, our subconscious, is like a giant elephant, and our consciousness is like the rider on that elephant. And it's the job of the rider to please the elephant. That's the way we, the best explanation I've seen. And if you want to read in detail about that, that's a great book to do it.
Yeah, I was just
Yes.
wondering, you mentioned in your speech about human beings have this tendency to try to segregate ourselves from the broader natural world,
Yes.
although we truly are part of it as just another species.
Yes.
I have noticed that we tend to also be the only species that I'm aware of that is altruistic towards other species that have no bearing directly on our survival or whether we perish or not. You know of any other place in nature where something like that occurs?
You're asking me if chimpanzees have pets. I don't think they do. The altruism, well, it's a matter of family. Most pets, if they're not out there to, I don't know, chase the coyotes away from the sheep or whatever, or for hunting dogs, they're mostly part of a family. In some cases they replace children, in other cases they're just in connection with it. That is a part of our community response. You get good feelings from that, in the same way that you would get good feelings of having killed the mastodon and brought all that meat home to the tribe. And those feelings, the feelings that come from being of value, that's what you've got to have for a social group. And there are lots of ways each one can define how it is that they want to be valuable. I may think it's valuable to give a book to somebody. He's already read the book and hated it. But he says nice things, and so I get, I feel good. I did something good. I did something useful.
Dolphins say it.
Yes. Yeah, dolphins have, in fact, that's right. Dolphins have saved humans. I don't know whether you call that altruistic or not, because there are little dancy words about whether it is or isn't. You have to, for instance, the dolphin has to put himself at risk while he does the saving. And of course, St. Bernards and such things that are trained to do that for the most part. I don't want to. Well, first of all, I'm not qualified really to voyage very far into that. But I think it has to do mostly with our super empathy, that we can project it onto anything, a dead cardinal, an image of a dead cardinal.
You said you did want to voyage into that, but you're a professor emeritus and you can't lose tenure, so you just go wild.
I only launch into areas that I know absolutely nothing about after I've had a little something to drink.
All right.
Water here isn't doing it for me. I'm still very cautious. Yes. Well, wait. Go ahead, Mike.
Would you agree that, as I think, anything is beautiful if you get close enough or far enough away?
Actually, yes, I would agree with that. I've got pictures of black vultures' heads. The flesh, the foldy flesh that goes over that's black, looks like a British judge's wig. And as you get close enough, you lose context with everything bad about a vulture. And you just see this component part. You see the feather of the cardinal. You don't see the dead cardinal laying next to it. So by getting closer and closer, you take it into another whole world. And photography of this sort is called sometimes hyper-real, because you can accent the contrast, you can juxtapose colors, you can sharpen it way beyond what your human eye can see, and it becomes hyper-real.
Great. We're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you, John, for your beautiful pictures, your beautiful books.